Welcome back to another episode of Work in Programming. This week, I am joined by Jesse Herlitz, the General Manager of CastroFM. He currently runs product development and design at CastroFM. He is a veteran of the industry. He's worked at all sorts of different companies, including redesigning the Starbucks mobile application experience. So yeah, Jesse, would you mind just giving a quick introduction?
My name is Jesse Herlitz. I'm the general manager of Castro Podcasts. We're a really small team out of British Columbia, Canada, and we make a podcast player that is for people who listen to lots and lots of podcasts. And before that, I was VP of product at a company called Flow. Flow is project management software, but like really nice looking project management software. I worked on that for a number of years. Before that, I worked at a company called Simple, who they're like a bank startup out of Portland, Oregon. I worked on design there for a little while, and then before that, I worked at Starbucks. Was their head of digital product design. We basically built a team of just our friends, and nobody knew about us. It's a really fun long story, and we can get into it later. But we were sort of like this underground team that ended up completely taking over digital design because nobody told us that we couldn't do it. So that was a lot of fun there. And then before that, I was working at an agency in the early days of the iPhone, just designing apps. And before that, I was testing apps. And before that, I worked at the Apple Store, taking shit from angry people at the Genius Bar. So that's kind of my quick and dirty career background.
Cool. Yeah, no, I love it. I always find it fun to just kind of like get an idea of where someone's journey's gone through. Because I find like it must be like different going across like all of those different types of businesses, right? Like I imagine. Well, it sounds like you almost played it as a startup when you were at Starbucks, I guess. Then.
Definitely, we for a long time, I guess we weren't like technically allowed to exist as a team, but we had a couple of people just spin it up, and not talk about us and let us do great work. And I'm very thankful for those people.
Wow, that's amazing. Castro is a podcast app that I guess lets people curate their podcast a lot more. I believe. I guess is that how you, like it's on iOS, correct?
Yeah,
Only.
yeah, it's on iOS only. Yeah, and I guess its main superpower is just its ability to um, kind of fine tune your relationship with each show that you listen to. So there's some shows where you're just like, I want this thing at the top of my list when it comes out. I want to know about it. I want to consume it right away, and everything else kind of takes a backseat. And there's other stuff
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, yeah, I want to listen to it, but it's I'm not going to listen to every single episode. And there's other stuff where it's just like, I'm going to dive into this thing like maybe once a year or something like that. And
Right.
there's other things like, serials and stuff, but uh, in general, like Castro is the app that lets you kind of put each show on autopilot so that uh, all you have to do when you open the app is you hit play, and it gives you the stuff that you actually want. And if you want to reorder your list around, we basically everything's sort of built around this queue concept. So you basically have like a single playlist, and that playlist gets fed in an automated way based off of your preferences, but you can kind of override it at any moment and just say, I want to listen to this next. And it kind of allows you to just hit play and kind of burns through that list, which is really nice. So um,
Wow.
yeah.
It sounds like it's like for people who take their podcast seriously.
Yeah. I think at a certain point, if you get really into listening to podcasts, you're just sort of, it can be quite a frustrating experience if you're just using some of the stock apps out there, they're not really built for like people who just listen to a lot of this stuff. And so that's kind of where Castro has found its niche.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. Like, so for instance, like I use Spotify for podcast listening, which I enjoy, I guess, but it definitely is like I have to manually go out and find the episodes. Like I can't really trust it to just kind of show me what I want to hear, because it just plays episodes in order by whatever's most recently. You can follow the podcast, but it'll just show you like whatever's most recent. So I guess that'd be kind of interesting to play with it. Hopefully, at some point I'll probably switch back to iPhone. But I'm just curious because I used your marketing advertising tool that you put together, and I was interested in it because like when we jumped on the call, you'd mentioned like how you built the system, and you mentioned that you had gotten a quote from a development company, and you ended up just going with your own shorter experience or experiment that seemed like you kind of pieced it together really quickly. And I'm just curious how you kind of come up with those sorts of experiments, or what's the experience like doing that?
Yeah. So just to provide a little bit of background, podcasters can advertise their shows in our app. So if you're kind of like a new podcast and you're looking to kind of get up and running and get your show in front of people where they're actually listening to podcasts, Castro has this feature called Promoted Podcasts. And it's similar to what Overcast is doing. They sort of have this website that you can go to, and we do too, where you can kind of just go and hand us your podcast URL and write a short description, and we put it in our app, and then people start subscribing to it. And then we kind of send you a performance report about how it went. But when we set out to do this, we saw what they were doing, and we're like, you know what? Like, they're the only ones that are doing this. We have, about 17% of our users are on a subscription plan where they pay us to use our app. And then we have a free tier where, the remaining 83% of our users are using it for free. And so what we wanted to do was just enable, we wanted to like keep going as a company, and part of that, it just means diversifying revenue streams other than just the App Store. And so this was kind of like one step in that direction. We're like, all right, we got to do this. And so we just started figuring it out, and we had no background in advertising at all. Like up until this point in my career, I've never had to deal with ads in any capacity whatsoever. And so a lot of the terms and the metrics and the things like that you would typically understand going into something like this, like I had none of that. So, but that's pretty normal when you work in design or engineering, especially if you've ever done agency work. Like, that you just jump into a new business model from time to time, and you just have to figure it out, and that's okay. And you can kind of sprinkle in different things that you've learned along the way. So the story is that Andrew, our owner, just rang me one day, which he doesn't often do. I might like talk to him on the phone maybe 2 or 3 times a year. He runs a lot of different businesses, and he prefers to talk over text. And so if I get a phone call, I'm like, oh, okay, this must be important. He's like, hey man, so I know you've been planning to do this thing for a while, but like, you really just need to do it. And I'm like, okay. So I like basically, and I'm so grateful for it, because I had spec'd out this like, full end-to-end experience, and it was basically what you would hope to have like at the end of this journey, and like every bell, every whistle, and like all the tracking, all the different things, and I had to force myself to like actually do the thing that I know how to do as a product manager, and say, okay, what's the thinnest slice of this thing that actually gets us like on the map, like gets us out in the market, gets us doing things. And so yeah, I basically took all of our plans and, we had run those by a development company and said like, hey, how much would it cost to build this thing? Because like all that we do is we build and design the iOS app. We don't really do a ton of web stuff. So we asked somebody else about it, and
Right.
they're like, yeah, they took a while. They looked at it very diligently, and they're like, that'll be about $90,000. We're like, well, I don't know if we'll make that much money in a year in our first year on this platform. So it's just kind of like,
Yeah.
that's probably not gonna fly. So, yeah, I just one day I sat down and I was like, all right, I got to do this. I got to figure this out. And I ended up just thinking like, what if I captured the customer information with a Google form and then took it from there. And then I'm like, okay, like once I have the Google form, like, and I have the information, I need to know what to do with it. And so I talked to the engineering team at Castro, and they're like, well, like in theory, we could just like keep a blob of JSON and put it on a server, and if you can like feed something into that, then we can make this thing work. And so Google Form obviously goes into like a spreadsheet, a Google Sheet. But there's all these different things that needed to happen. There's like collecting payment. There's actually like parsing the podcast URL and like grabbing all this information about it. There's different price points. There's all these different things. And so Zapier was kind of like the key sort of connector of all those things.
And so you stitched. So you basically took like Zapier and you connected everything. Did you have developers actively like helping with some of the work, or was it all through like no code tools like Zapier? I'm just curious.
So I did, like when I got stuck, I would ask a developer just like, hey, like this API request isn't going through. I had some experience doing API requests just because at Flow, I used to like prototype features in Apple's Shortcuts app, which used to be called Workflow. And like I would hit our API and just be like, okay, like what if we built a feature that did something like this, and so it was just something that like for me got like it was a form of programming that was visual, and it was something that I could understand. And so I got really, really good at it, and I started like creating these very complex workflows. And that sort of when it came to like Zapier, it was like, okay, well, Zapier and Workflow are very, very similar, or I guess Shortcuts is what it's called now, but very, very similar. It's just that Zapier is hooked up to a lot more stuff, is a little bit more mature. So yeah, like
yeah. Well, it's really cool that you can kind of like do that automatically without having to. I mean, it is designing. It's like designing software. It's just like a visual way of doing it, I guess.
Yeah. I found there were some things that like Shortcuts could do that Zapier couldn't do. Like Shortcuts can do loops, which is really cool. And Zapier can't really do that, but Zapier does if statements and like they don't call it if statements, but that's what they are. And it's basically like, okay, under these conditions, do this, otherwise do this. And like, you can get really, really far with if statements if you need to. So, yeah, like it started out like just really, really basic, like just getting the podcast through to our spreadsheet. And then, it eventually turned into like this thing actually like hits our server and tells it to refresh when a new podcast comes in. And there was a bunch of manual correspondence that I was doing in the beginning, like sending emails and stuff, and I still do send emails, but I've been able to automate a significant number of them, just sending out reporting and things like that, and your ads live and all that stuff.
Yeah, like I think when I sent an email, you ended up replying directly, but I think at that point it was probably a little bit automated, right?
It might have been. Yeah, it might have been.
Yeah.
There's still some things where where I'm sending out emails, but I'm looking to, that's kind of like the next part of the journey, is just automating all the communications to the best of my ability anyway. But
cool.
but yeah, like
Awesome.
I was also like, okay, there's all these like ads now live, and I have to keep track of them all, and when they need to be taken down and when they need to be put back up, and so we started automating, taking them down automatically, and we started also just like we use this project management tool called Height, and Michael Villar, who used to work at Stripe, but also before that made this really cool tool called Kickoff, which was very similar to Flow, which I used back in the day before they got acquired by Stripe. He's working on Height now, and it's wonderful. And they have an API, and I'm able to basically automatically create all my correspondence tasks in there via their API. So it's this like spider web of different things that it's basically, I mean, it's a significant portion of our business now, and it's all stitched together by a designer who doesn't know how to write code at all, really. So at least not in the text editor sort of way. Like there's some stuff I have to do, like kind of making sure that my request is formed correctly sometimes, but it's pretty straightforward if you know how to use computers.
Yeah, you're kind of writing the little scripts that like tie it all together, but you're getting the respondents and like connection kind of like to different tools for free. So it's really interesting that you can get that much done. Like, do you think like going forward you would maintain it like that, or would you eventually like turn that into like a fully automated piece of software, I guess, down the line once it becomes more viable? Because I guess at the same time it lets you iterate more quickly too, right? Like you can test the feature differently. Like if you want to change up the flow or have different things automated.
Yeah, I mean that does get to like the why of why you would do something this way. And that certainly was important because we didn't know how our ads were going to perform. We didn't know what they were worth money-wise. And so like if we had done what I had originally planned to do and spent, $90,000 on the system and then found out like, hey, this isn't worth nearly that and it'll take us years to pay that back or whatever, like that would have been a huge mistake financially speaking. And so a lot of this was just about like let's build this shitty thing and test it and see what the next right thing to do is after that. And I think that's like probably like the thing that I'm most grateful for through this experience is just build something that is not as cool as what the other guys have yet. Like in our app it looks exactly the same, but in terms of like what gets presented to an ad buyer, like it's not as cool as that, but it works. And the value is there, right? And but yeah, like it's, I don't know how to succinctly summarize that sort of like thought into like a single phrase, but it's something like, you shouldn't be sort of building something that you don't really know is yet valid. Like you don't want to build the wrong things. You don't want to spend like a lot of time efficiently building the wrong things, because then you kind of waste your time and you waste your resources. And I guess in your case, I'm actually curious how that works, because so I was kind of like looking into the company. I know that it's so you mentioned Andrew. That's from like the Tiny Capital group, right? Yep. Yeah.
That you guys are kind of a part of. How does that work? Are you like, is it built from the ground up, or is it like purchased, or?
It was acquired about 2 years ago by Tiny.
Yeah.
And so I've been using Castro since Castro 1. And so I've been a huge fan of it for a long time. And over the years, I got to know, through a friend, I got to know the two founders. And eventually, the reason that they ended up getting acquired was Andrew one day was just like, what's the best podcast player out there?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, Castro. Just on Twitter. And then a month later, he had acquired them. and
That's amazing.
I was like, oh, I didn't know you were. I thought you were just looking for an app. Like I didn't know you were looking to buy an app in the capital B, buy an app sort of thing. So
That's pretty incredible.
yeah, that was funny. I was working at Flow at the time, which is another one of Andrew's companies, and then Flow ended up scaling down quite a bit at one point, and just to get to cash flow positive. And so I ended up moving over and lending a hand at MetaLab for a while I was like figuring out where else in the family I would end up working out. And then
And MetaLab is like their agency that they started with, right?
that's right. Yeah. It's a design agency.
Okay.
It's mostly remote, but headquarters is in Victoria, BC, and there's a big office in Vancouver as well. But yeah, I was lending a hand there and looking for where I would end up landing. And so I started helping out at Castro in design because I already knew the guys, and we were friends, and it was just like, well, I've got some extra time, like I'll lend a hand here, and I'm still getting paid, so it doesn't really matter. And I started doing that, and then later in the year they were just like, hey, neither of the founders wanted to run the company. And so they had somebody else come in, didn't work out. And then eventually they asked me to do it. And so I got my permanent residency in Canada, which was something that I was waiting for about 9 months. And I was able to accept it.
It's always fun.
So yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's been super fun.
So how do you find, like, it sounds like, just in my head, I'm like, it's the transition from like power user to like maintaining the actual product, which must be pretty exciting.
I mean, it was such a smooth transition because I was like, I went from like power user to like, oh, I'm helping out in design, to like, oh, like I'm in charge of this thing now. And so it was like a really, really smooth transition, and like already having an existing relationship with the engineers there, it was just like the most natural thing ever. So yeah, I really enjoyed that part. And honestly, like on the daily, like, I don't know, it's fun to work on stuff that you actually love. And I do love this app. And so, I don't know, it just seemed like a really natural fit. But yeah, I did want to answer like one of your early questions that I didn't yet answer, which is, are you thinking about building out this ad system more robustly? And the answer is yes. Right now, the way that it works is when you sort of submit your podcast to us through the Google form, we automatically, Stripe emails you an invoice. And then if you pay it, then it triggers all this other stuff that happens. And, it's just this massive wad of duct tape. but it works. And so what we're kind of constrained from doing right now is targeting the ads in a given category. And so we're like, okay, well, like how would we do this? Because I don't want people to have to pick between like 300 different options, and it's not 300, but like quite a few different permutations in a Google form. And so I ended up looking around. We looked at a service called Ad Butler, which is very robust and kind of built for, it's like a Swiss Army knife for any kind of ads business. It's very powerful, but they take like 15% of what you make there, which is pretty steep.
Wow.
And like there'd still be a significant amount of work we'd have to do. And so we got pretty far into checking that out, but it just ultimately like didn't quite sync up or naturally happen. And then I looked at Typeform just because they're a little bit smoother in some ways than Google Forms, but there are actually quite a few limitations that they had that Google Forms didn't have. But there was, I don't know, like one had like some great things over here, one had some great things over here, and like none of it worked.
You definitely get like a lot better like UI experience with Typeform, I guess, and it's like mobile friendly first, and all of that fun stuff. What were the like limitations that you found? I'm curious. Like, was it just like it wouldn't accept like certain types, or like it wouldn't? Because I know that like you have to pay money to like, or pay quite a bit to like actually use it for certain purposes. I guess. Like,
Yeah, I
sorry,
mean,
I don't want to derail the.
no, I mean, I'm trying to remember exactly which thing that we bumped into that was a problem, but like one thing that
Mm,
was really, really rough was that uh, when you actually go and like edit the Google Sheet that everything gets input
mm.
into, it just like totally shits the bed.
Oh,
Like, and we need to be able to go back and like edit that sheet and make changes to it and stuff. And that was a bit
right.
concerning just because I'm like, what if I need to like manually put something in here? And there's some limitations with Google Forms with that too, but like there's ways around it.
Mm,
There was not ways around it this way, so that was a little concerning.
yeah. Okay.
I think there was some other stuff like it had to do with actually displaying all the different categories of podcasts that you could advertise in and making a system
Mm,
that could actually show you the price of something as well as what that thing was all in one spot.
mm,
And it sounds really simple, but was not able to do that in a meaningful way. They sort of, I don't know, for what we were trying to do, it was just like the complexity level was just above what Typeform was capable of. And so
mm,
it didn't end up working out. And so what I ended up
yeah.
doing was actually checking out Shopify, which,
Okay.
most people would not think of for this kind of business at all.
Right.
But it ended up being that like they had all the nuts and bolts of every single thing that we needed. And my key concern was just
Mm,
like, okay, am I allowed to sell some digital goods on here? And yes,
mm.
yes, you can. Just because they're
Cool.
they
Okay.
they have a lot of stuff like for fulfillment that we don't need or use,
Right.
but everything else is there. Like I can say like, okay, you want to buy an ad in the business category? It's this much money, and for this many days, and this much money for this many days, and all that hooks up on the back end to Zapier too. And but what's nice about
Mm,
it just in general is that you capture the payment up front. And right now we send people an invoice in their email, and I don't know if it's going to go to spam or not.
yeah.
And we do see a lot of people actually fill out the form, and not like an overwhelming amount, but like I would say maybe 10% of people will fill out the form and not actually
Mm,
pay. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
But they don't actually end up submitting their ads, right? I think it doesn't go through it ends at that point in the process. I
Yeah.
assume.
Yeah. The process is designed in such a way that like, it doesn't actually go live unless they pay.
Right.
Um,
But it must be like a big drop off point for a lot of, well, not maybe not a lot, but even a few users. It ends up being like a bit of an attrition, right?
yeah. Well, I imagine,
I guess.
it doesn't look like super legit, like going and filling out a Google form for this stuff. Like some people who are more down to experiment are like, oh yeah, no problem. But like other people
Yeah.
who are like, are these guys for real? Like, you know,
Right.
I,
Yeah, I think if I hadn't like tried bootstrapping a business in the past, I would not have been like, oh, okay, this sounds like, because like I jumped in, like got on the call with you, and like I just totally got it. I was like, cool, that makes perfect sense. Like when I got emailed it, I'm like, oh, cool, like they're working on a feature. But I definitely can imagine that like that wouldn't be exactly what people are expecting most of the time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, I don't know how many people are like not even filling out the form at this point, which is
Mhm.
partly because some of our Google Analytics stuff is being fixed at the moment. It's actually being worked on right now for the promote page. So I need more data on like how many people are just like bouncing on it, but it won't matter soon just because we'll be replacing the system with the Shopify system, and they have tons of like great analytics built in. And um,
Mhm.
yeah, I was able to like customize the theme. Uh, there was just like a couple of fields that I needed to be able to capture, and
Mhm.
those fields, custom fields, like you have to have an engineer actually like set those up. And I was able to find this development firm in Sweden who, like, all said and done, all the custom development cost me $350.
Wow.
It was like next to nothing. And like, I needed basically people to be able to give me their podcast URL before they checked out. And I needed like a description of their show and an optional, like, they could change the display name of their show if they wanted to. And so those...
And then aside from that, is the entire page built with just like Shopify? Like you didn't have to do any custom code for like the default, embedding it in your site?
No, and I don't think it will be embedded in our site. Like it'll probably, you click the promote tab and on our site and it will redirect you to the Shopify site. And that is actually, I think, how things work on Overcast site right now. They kind of have this weird separate site sort of thing. I could potentially embed it in there, but I don't know if that would be something that we need. I know you can embed products in a site. So we could do that potentially, but yeah, I think this will be like, it's got the same like branding as our site. It's got the same like typography, and it's all pretty dialed in. And so right now I'm just waiting for a new build of the app to go into the App Store, and just hooking up the new spreadsheet system, which is going to be like way more dialed in than what we had before because we learned a lot. So that'll be nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what are some of like the first learnings that you had? I think I purchased before, like pretty early on. So like I think mine are just kind of like in the, like they're just starting now actually, or sometime this week.
No, it's live now. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's live now.
Yeah.
Cool. I don't know if I realize there's no way for me to see it, but it would be pretty cool. And what are some of the first like? I'm assuming like around like advertising within your genre and things like that were probably like high priority. But were there any like I guess like discoveries that kind of surprised you with the experiment so far?
Yeah. So I think one thing that really shocked me, generally speaking, is like there's a lot of like super polished podcasts out there and who look like they'll do like really, really well, and they don't. They don't perform super well in terms of like an ad at times.
Yeah.
And there are other scrappier, smaller podcasts where if they're helping people improve their lives, it performs really, really well. Sorry, my HomePod's trying to talk back to me at the moment. So an example would be there's this. I think we might have talked about this before, but like there's this show called Inner Monkey, and it's like it looks like pretty, like it looks like a hobby podcast, like from an external like point of view, like. That's not to say like it looks bad or anything like that, but it doesn't look like this high budget sort of thing. And like the performance of it is just like off the charts. Like people love this show and they will subscribe to it. Every time we run an ad with it, it just goes bonkers. And then, we've partnered with some other bigger names too. And like, sometimes it works out really, really well. And other times it's like, whoa, I expected it to do better than that. And sort of, there's, I guess the whole thing that I've had to learn through all this is just like, hey, just because you think that something's going to work super well, it doesn't mean it will or it won't.
Yeah.
It's just, it's,
I mean, it's pretty interesting. I'm looking at the Inner Monkey podcast just now, and it's like 7 or 8 minute episodes. It seems like it's kind of like, it looks like it's a pretty fun podcast. Like, maybe like, do you think it's like the artwork or like the branding or do you think it's just something about the podcast itself?
I'm a designer by trade, and so like I think that sometimes like I can, as a designer, you fall into this trap at times where basically like you see the success of Apple and like how fantastically wonderfully successful they've been. And you sort of have this like trap of attributing that all to design. And the reality is that like Apple is successful because they're like a pretty buttoned up company too. On top of all that stuff, like they're operationally very, very sound. There's a lot of substance that backs up all the impeccable design work that they do. And so, but like you kind of get this idea in your head, like, ooh, if I make something like really super polished looking, like it's going to be successful. And the reality is much more complex than that. Design is like a multiplier, but it is not like the necessarily the core of the thing that you're doing, or the core of the value necessarily. And so when I look at Inner Monkey, like it looks like from a design perspective, like it looks pretty like, all right, I don't know, like it's some pretty basic design work. And so like that's one of the things that just shocked me is just like, this thing is really drawing people in. And I think because like one of their things that they're solving is just like they're striking a chord with people who are trying to wrangle their bad habits, I think. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. I think a lot of people suffer from that. There's like, oh, there's this thing that I do and I hate it and I keep doing it. Why do I keep doing it? And so I think that like a lot of people are looking to podcasts because they want to improve. Some people are, looking for companionship or, basically they're piggybacking on somebody else's friendship that they have or whatever. There's a lot of different reasons, but I think that just in the advertising side of things, I have seen this sort of self-improvement stuff seem to have a lot of traction. So, yeah.
And I guess when it's like so short and like so brief that like maybe it's just like anyone who sees it is like, oh yeah, I'm there's almost no risk in watching it. Whereas like if you commit to like a 1 hour interview, you might get some useful information out of it, but there's a lot more, I guess, content you have to sift through if it ends up being something that you don't like as much, or they'll just drop, right?
Yeah. Whereas
like if it's super small and super super useful, I guess, like right off the bat, maybe they're kind of, that's good. It's interesting. Like I listen to a certain type of podcast, so I guess like in my mind I just assume that like all podcasts are kind of like in the same vein. But I guess when you listen to that many podcasts, you start finding like you just start seeing like different varieties. I mean, there's a lot of those like comedy shows that I've started listening to, and then like mostly like technical stuff. But like fun podcasts, I like some of them like storytelling sort of podcasts are like really, I guess like I've listened to a few, and then there's like a lot of variety there, and it's kind of interesting to like kind of branch out, I guess. Like you end up seeing like quite a few different varieties, I guess.
Yeah. I guess like I do think that we have a tendency to think by default like everybody sees the world the way that we do, and part of the beauty of human life is diversity, and that like like I don't know, like I disagree with my family about a ton of things on a political level, and I'm just like at times like being like, oh man, like I'm just gonna wait and they're gonna see. And it doesn't matter how many like terrible things end up happening.
Right.
They're never going to see. It's and that is because like, if you don't value evidence and facts and things like that, then like, of course, like nothing's going to change your mind. So like, I don't know, like we tend to, as people, see things the way that, or we assume that people process information or they enjoy life or they have like this view of the world, and that's like operationally the same as the way that you do. And part of the beauty of life is just that that's not true at all. And it can be painful at times, but like it can also be like really helpful too. It can, and if you're somebody who's, I don't know, self-aware or can flex on some of those things, it can be really beneficial to have those different people in your life and see things the way that they see them. So yeah, I guess
like was very poetic.
Another kind of thing that that I've learned, I guess, is just that like this is a communication business. Like you have to answer questions quickly. You need to deal with frustrations swiftly. You need to set expectations appropriately. Like if like it's something that as a maker you're shielded from a lot of times. So you work in programming, right? Like how often are you having to deal with customers directly?
Yeah, like I work with clients, so I do have kind of that feedback loop, but
Right.
typically we don't necessarily interface with their, because we're building a product for a client,
Mm-hmm.
so we don't necessarily interface with their customers very directly at all.
Yeah.
Like I'd say almost never. When I used to be in startups, a lot of the time, like we'd meet customers, but we'd meet them at like I built this networking application, and we ended up launching it at the TEDx Toronto event, and so we ended up actually meeting customers for the first time there, and it was kind of funny. Like we noticed some bugs in the system just because like I don't know, we just assumed that everybody had like a proper maintained LinkedIn profile, and I guess some people have like certain exceptions, and it was kind of interesting to like I guess interface with people, but like yeah, that's definitely not the normal pace. Like it's definitely not the day to day.
Yeah. Yeah, and there can be a huge opportunity cost to not having those relationships too, right? Like if you're trying to grow a business and you're not able to make yourself less important, I guess, and what I mean by that is like nobody gives a shit about your startup like you do, right? Like
Right.
Nobody's been preparing their LinkedIn profile just for this moment so that they could use your startup, right? Like they're coming to you like with what they've got, and like it's sort of your job to kind of be able to anticipate that and to kind of turn the light bulb on for them and be like, oh, like I'm excited about it. Like I okay, like walk me through it. I'll get set up, that sort of thing. I did experience that a lot at Flow, where you're using the tool every day to build the tool, but I was actually talking to Michael at Height the other day about this because there's a lot of like overlap between those two things, and one thing that came up was just I asked for this feature where if you duplicate a task, that the tasks kind of right up inside of it would be duplicated as well. And he's like, why would you ever want that? And I was like, Michael, I know exactly why you're saying that right now. And it's because you're a programmer. And every single task that you ever create is a snowflake. And you'll never create another one like it ever again. Right? Each task is a one-off thing. You have no repetitive work whatsoever. And I was like, one of my things that I wish I would have paid more attention to when I was at Flow is that most people in the working world, that is not the case. Their tasks repeat all the time. And it's like this tool that they're using is the only thing that's keeping them sane because it remembers all these complex things. And it's all in one place and you can kind of refer back to it over and over again. But for me, like I experienced this with this ads business. Like I have to send an email every week to this person, and I need a link to their reporting information. I need a link to their email address, and I need like a new due date on each one of these things. But it's the same. It's obviously the information gets updated, but like I need to be reminded to do this thing. And when I copy a task, like all that information is still relevant. And so I got to see it from like a different perspective. So I think sometimes like you're going to be completely blind to the pain that you don't feel, that your users feel. And the only way you're going to be able to get that is either by experiencing it yourself or by talking to them. as often as you can.
Yeah.
So
So do you have to? How do you get a hold of your users? Like if you're using the app, right? You've got Castro.
mhm.
I mean, I'm guessing like with the podcasters that are advertising, it might be a bit easier because you have that like direct dialogue with them, where we're emailing back and forth, and if they have a question, you can answer it directly. And that's kind of how a lot of like B2B businesses, I feel like, are. So like in that case, I feel like being, working with a business, it's a lot easier to get a hold of your customer. Like if you're building, say, Castro the app, and you want to see how like your users are experiencing the ads, like how do you get a hold of them, and like how do you do like focus groups or?
You know, our customers, like our B2C customers, are
Hmm,
quite vocal. And if they don't like something, I'll hear about it immediately on Twitter most of the time. So we have two Twitter accounts.
right.
We have a support account. We have the kind of main account. And
Hmm.
um, I man the main Twitter account most of the time. I would say probably 95% of the time it's me. And so
Hmm.
if they don't like something, I hear about it. If they do like something, I hear about it. They're both like they're vocal both ways, and that's great. Like they're
Yeah.
really passionate about the app and they love it, and but if you cross them, like you're gonna hear about it for sure. So I've with when I was at Flow, like I had to find people who were actually passionate about it enough to like talk about it. And whenever I would get
Right.
either something coming to me through support, or that the support person couldn't answer, like I would often just
Hmm.
like email with people directly and be like, hey, would you like to take like 30 minutes and just, I'd love to hear how you're using the app, and like you know what what it is that we could do better and that sort of thing. And I just made a regular habit of doing
Hmm.
that all the time, just because I was making
Hmm.
decisions on what we were going to build next. And so um, like your job as a product person is to kind of like figure out what the problems are, regardless of whatever
Hmm.
solutions are being suggested. And sometimes they're great solutions, and other times they're just like people doing their best, and making software is not
Right.
their thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's typically how I would run that process before. And then earlier in my career,
Yeah.
I was just like way too arrogant to ever do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can kind of relate. Yeah, no, it's definitely like that, where it's I guess it takes a lot of uh, humility to go out and actually ask other people how your work is, because I know I don't do that often enough, I think. Um, but like, so if you did like go out and you talk to a customer and you kind of uncovered like a problem, how do you like take that? Like I don't know, like maybe you're talking to a customer and they're like, oh yeah, like I don't know how that would even come up. Maybe they seem like they're frustrated with something, and maybe it's kind of clear, not quite clear what the problem is. I guess I don't know. Like how do you like take that from problem and then track that so that you don't forget it? Like do you put that into like a project management tool as like an item to explore, or do you like immediately act on it?
Yeah, I think I tend to pay attention more to trends than like
Mm-hmm.
really cool like one-off requests. Unless if it's just like super simple just to knock out, like we'll change things and tweak things that, are high impact and
Mm-hmm.
low effort. Like that's no problem. But I think that I tend to try and look for trends of just like, hey, this is what people are really, really asking for. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, the obvious thing for us right now would be to build an iPad app because people are asking about it um,
Right.
all the time. And, like, we don't really have the resources to dive into it, but we also really want to do it right now. And so I have to figure out, like, okay, like, what are we going to do? Are we going to do a Kickstarter to, like, fund this thing, to, like, make it happen? Or, like, how badly do people really want it? Like, with Watch Sync, people really wanted that. And so we're like, okay, we're going to do this, but, like, I don't want to be I don't want to just give this away for free just because it's a lot of work maintaining Watch Sync. It's
Yeah.
really complicated. So
Yeah.
that's like a paid feature, and that's kind of like how
Okay.
we justify like, okay, like this is a part of our subscription service, and like we justify keeping it up that way and making that investment that way.
Do you like invest mostly in the paid features because they bring in more like revenue, or do you focus more on just uh, actually never mind. That's kind of an odd stream of thought, but sorry.
No, that's actually a really good question. And I think we try and balance doing both. So we have like an upcoming feature that is unpaid. I think there's little tiny components of it that are paid, but it's not necessarily the reason that we did it. And
Mm.
it was just sort of like, hey, Apple released this new technology, and they were really keen to work with us on using it. And when Apple is keen to work with you on, I mean, like keen enough for us to like go down to like Apple headquarters and like work with them on it, right? And so like,
Yeah,
and it's
you know that it's going to help your app for sure.
yeah. So there's like us working with them, and then them featuring us because we're helping support initiatives that they want to get behind. Like that's kind of like a no-brainer. Like getting featured in the App Store is really really helpful to driving downloads and all that, and driving business and all that stuff. So yeah, I think ultimately like we are a business, and we want to do things that will keep the business going and growing. But I think that like if people get the sense that you're just only like doing the paid features, like I don't know, we don't want it to feel gross either like that. So we try and strike a balance, I guess, is the answer to your question.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, like it's good to do that, and like at the same time, like every feature has like a logical extension sometime, or like a lot of features have like logical extension that then like might be like a premium feature that kind of builds on it or something. Like I think a lot of fitness apps do that pretty well. But yeah, sorry, I interrupted you. You were kind of going into, I guess, paying attention to trends and then finding like, I guess, common trends that you want to focus on, and then focusing on those. I was thinking like, do you track, I guess, the trends that you're seeing at all, or is it more like, internal knowledge that you just kind of accumulate over time and then act on over after a while, I guess?
With a more complicated product, I used to track stuff. And it was such a miserable experience trying to track all that stuff. But there is software that'll let you do it, and we tried it, and it was like, it's one of those things that you really have to stay on top of. And I think the reality is you're going to have always way more ideas and different things that you can do, that you could do, than you can possibly are actually capable of delivering on, right? And so when your product gets more complex, like that's just exponentially so. For us, I think it's a little simpler. Like it's a single app right now. It's not super complicated. Like, and it is actually already pretty feature rich, and so or mature. And so I don't know, a lot of times we just end up hearing like the same thing over and over again. Like I'll get the when's the iPad app coming? When's the Mac app coming? When's the web app coming? That sort of thing.
Dark mode.
And we've got dark mode and all that stuff, but okay. we'll hear about that stuff, and but then like every once in a while we'll get these like smaller things like, oh, can you support AirPlay too? And it's like we'll look at it and be like, oh man, can we do that? Like that sounds cool, because you get like a larger buffer, and like it's one of those things that sounds really simple, but when you look into it, it's like fucking ridiculously hard to implement. And
Mhm.
And the one guy who's been asking about it for the last year or something, he's like,
Yeah.
you know, he's the one guy who's going to be super hyped that you did it, and you spent 3 months
That's it.
working on this thing, and it probably won't pay off, unfortunately. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's all a balancing game. It's like, you know, you've got to mature out of the place where you just think that you know everything, and that you're the perfect user, and that, you know, like, you know what's best. Like, you got to get past that shit, because that's not helpful at all. You really do need to listen to people, but you also have to connect it to, like, okay, do I actually have the team to, like, pull this thing off right now, you know? And can we, how long is it going to take, and how many people is it going to are going to get excited about it? And so it's an insane balancing game, and unfortunately you're just the man in the middle, where everybody 9 months out of the year hates you and 3 months out of the year loves you. You know, like,
Right. It's kind of like back when like Facebook made any sort of change. Everyone hated it, but then like a year later, everyone was just used to it.
yeah, yeah, and
Except
we don't
Facebook
run
kinda
into
sucks
that a
now, so-
lot. I think
Yeah.
Facebook's got a unique sort of very regressive user base now.
Yeah.
So it's like, like, you know, oh,
Yeah.
you moved my
That's a good
shit.
point.
Yeah, like, all right, man.
I mean, it went from children to angry adults, basically.
Yeah, which is basically children.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we all go from diapers to diapers, man. That's just the way that it is.
That's reality.
Yeah. So yeah, like, I feel like, I don't know, like, it was a bummer seeing what Mike Mattis did with their paper product, and it was so cool looking, and and then, like, all the wonderful user base of Facebook were not into it. They're like, I want that same old boring thing, and if you change it, I'm gonna freak out. And, you know, Facebook is what it is now. So they kind of had to acquire their next audience through Instagram. But yeah, they're operating at a scale that is just absolutely insane. And I think at that scale, like, it definitely gets much more complex. And there's a danger
Yeah,
there,
it
right?
has to.
Like, because
Yeah.
maybe somebody who has a lot less to lose can come along and be more experimental and do the thing that ends up capturing that large audience next. But, like, I don't know, like, Facebook has this massive ads business that they have to keep running, and right now it's working, and so if it isn't broken, don't fix it. So
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they're going anywhere. Yeah. Sorry, I know I originally scheduled this for an hour. I think we were going a bit over, but so maybe we can cut it in a bit. But I was just curious if you had anything, like, if you're like, so the people that tend to watch this podcast are a bit more junior in their career, you know, they might be working their first or second or third job, and they're kind of trying to, like, you know, figure out how to, like, move along and improve and things to get better at. And I know that you also made the move from, like, design to product to design back to product to kind of everything. So I feel like you've made, like, a lot of these transitions in your life. Do you, like, have any, like is there anything in particular that you'd give, like, advice wise to, like, people trying to, like, I guess, get to that next, just to find something that they're really passionate about, or to find the track that they want to go on if they're considering making a move, or you know, how to, like, really excel in just general, I guess. Does that
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the things that just putting myself back in that space where everything is new all the time, and you're learning a ton, and you're getting super excited about what you're learning. I think, you know, and you're on Twitter, and you've got people that you look up to on Twitter who are, basically saying how they believe certain things should be done and whatever. And so you sort of like militantly adopt those views.
Okay.
I think, well, I don't know if it's like this as much in the programming world as it is was for me in the
Oh no, it is.
design world.
It's absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. But like, just chill the fuck out. Like I can't tell you how important it is to just be kind to the people that you're working with. And balance that. That doesn't mean like that you need to be a pushover. It just means that like the things that you're learning are exciting and new and cool, and you're going to feel like you know everything way before you know anything. And so like just chill the fuck out and like recognize that like there are going to be experiences ahead of you that are going to humble you, and they're going to be a great gift, and you're going to, and if you can take one of two paths. You can just like, the people who do really, really well are the people who learn from those humbling experiences. And I guess you can either just like crawl into a hole when you've been humbled and like be like, okay, well, I'm not going to try anything anymore, and sort of become really timid. I don't think that's the right way to go. I think it's just sort of like, no, I was wrong. All right, let's move on. And just say like, hey, I was wrong. I'm gonna learn from that. I'm gonna like keep going. I guess there's a third thing where people are just like, no, I was actually right. And those people are looking for new jobs every 6 months.
Right.
And, they continue to think that they're right. And some people are actually like really good at that. And, they don't last long at places, but they're actually really great at getting jobs. And it's that confidence or whatever. But it's not actually great at doing what you've been hired to do, which is making effective software for people. So I would say that's a really important factor, is just like, be kind. You don't need to be a pushover to be kind. On the other end of that, there are going to be people who you may be a little bit, you might have more raw talent than, who are your superior for a time. And I think that, and I've been the person who's been in charge of people who are much more talented than me, many times. And I think there's a way to do that well, and I think there's a way to do that poorly on both sides of that equation. And so there are some people who are just like very insecure. They know that you're out ahead of them, and they will try and hold you down, and like, don't suffer any of that foolishness. Like, like people who are going to like try and keep you down, it's because they are afraid of what it will cost them for you to succeed. You want to get out of that situation, go around it, go through it, do whatever you can to get out of that situation. Work for people who believe in you, who are not intimidated by you, who will do everything that they can to like back you up and help you grow. But also like, if you need a good bop on the head, like they'll give you that too. Like, I think that's really, really important. And as you grow into that manager role, maybe eventually, if that's something that you want, not everybody has to do that, but if that's something that you want, don't be freaked out by people who are better than you at this thing.
Yeah.
Like, get behind those people, empower them, and their success will be your success. Like, if you can get behind those people, like, and unleash them, some of those people don't have what they need from a confidence perspective in order to unlock that thing. And you can be that person who's like their champion, and you just like get behind them. And I think that once you get into that role, like, definitely become that person. But what you don't want to do is be, I don't know, we're covering all the different sort of quadrants of this equation, but basically,
Yeah.
you don't want to be the asshole in any of those situations. The asshole is going to be
Yeah.
the arrogant person who thinks that they know more than they do. You don't want to be
Yeah.
the junior person who is quite talented and gets crushed by somebody who's intimidated by them. Like, don't suffer any of that stuff. Get out of it. Find another job if you need to. Like, do not be held back by that stuff. And then,
Yeah.
at the same time, like, don't become that person who is intimidated by people who are better than you. Learn from them, like, and empower them. Give them everything that you can to help unlock them. And if you learn from them, like, their success will be your success. I never graduated college. I had like a couple years of community college, and I came from like a super poor family. I was pretty much on my own from when I was 17 years old. And I just like weaseled my way into this industry by just turning up and being like, "Hey, I'm here. What do you want me to do?" Like, I can do that. I can pick that up, that sort of thing. And I had some talent. I thought that I was going to be a programmer, actually, and that was not my talent at all. Very, very bad at that in the early days. I could probably be I'd be better at taking a crack at it now than I was then, but like, somebody like you're going to have those natural giftings and abilities that just like, it just rolls, and for me, that was not me at all. And then I found design, and that was something that I had that I could contribute. And I actually got really excited about it and enjoyed quite a bit. So, all that to say, like, yeah, I think that, gosh, I was talking, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second.
Oh, no problem. I was just like really enthralled by that. Actually, that was very insightful. I learned quite a bit. I think a lot of that applies to everyone. Like it, but sorry, continue.
Oh, I guess I was talking about like not having like the training to do this job. Oh, I was talking about learning from other people. That's right. Yeah. So like,
right. Yes.
You can, if you're willing to learn from other people who are more talented than you, like my college degree equivalent was being next to somebody who was way smarter than me, both naturally speaking, and also had like some training that I didn't have, and was willing to take me under their wing. And I just like soaked him up like a sponge, and I sort of gained my pseudo college degree by just doing work and being around people who had been to college and had like a really great education. Cause I was just some like redneck, like who grew up in a single wide trailer and, like very blue collar family, like,
Right.
and also just kind of hated school too. So, but loved doing work. So I think that, if you're willing to like, learn from the people around you who might be more talented than you, just be honest with yourself about that. Like, like this person's more talented than me. And, I think that a lot of that you have to be okay with like your giftings and abilities not necessarily being your identity or where you derive value from.
Right.
Because I don't know, otherwise you'll just ride the emotional roller coaster of like, oh, I'm really shitty at this, so therefore I have no value as a human being.
I've definitely experienced that where you put work above everything else, and you put a lot of pressure on yourself to try and succeed. Then if things don't quite go the way you anticipated, then seeing it as like personal failure. And I think there's a lot of that in like trying to be like a self-starter or being in business or something like that, where I know like a lot of people that I've spoken to that have tried like venturing out a bit on their own. Like it definitely is like a super hard, like it's a very common thing to just kind of do that, right? And it does it, yeah. Like I've definitely had that in my life where I focused on work is a kind of a substitute for anything else that I was lacking in, and then like a few things happened and some things got reprioritized, and I felt like I came out of it happier by like realizing that it wasn't everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a
Yeah,
good thing,
yeah,
but it's not everything. And that's really hard
yeah,
when you're just getting started, is like figuring that out. Because if you,
yeah.
I don't know, if somebody else gets in your way of your success too, like you could become very shitty towards that person and sort of not treat them like a
Hmm.
person too. So
Yeah.
this happens a lot with designers, like when it comes to the design that they build and the actual implementation of that design not matching up closely enough. And then there's sort of like
Hmm.
this adversarial relationship with the engineer. And um, like if I hold my portfolio in higher regard than I do our
Hmm.
our friendship or our working relationship, like it's going to get unnecessarily shitty between us, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that doesn't bode well for like, I mean, for like what you were saying earlier. It's just like, I mean, I feel like you've cultivated like a very. It sounds like you've made some fantastic relationships over the course of your career. It's like, if you don't treat people well, I mean, you might be able to get something done in the short term, but I guess like you don't build on that relationship, and if you end up like just dumping relationships here and there, what are you really building? I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, uh, on your deathbed, like the relationships are all you're going to have. Nobody's going to give a shit about the software. The software is just like how you're going to feed yourself, you know? Like it's a really poor uh, container for value because it ages quite a lot faster than a human being does. And, it's not going to be like reading a eulogy when you're dead. Like it's just software, And so like ideally, like I don't know, a lot of people kind of like are just, oh yeah, I try and keep work and my life separate. It's just like, dude, do you realize that you're alive while you're at work? Like, do you realize that you spend a significant portion of your time living at work? And the relationships that you make there matter. And if you want to be a serial killer and try and like cordon that off, like, okay, I guess, but it's all fake. You're
Yeah.
these are relationships. These are human beings. These are people. And like, I don't know. I guess if the only thing that really matters to you is like cash in the bank, like great. But again, yet another thing that will not be reading your eulogy at your funeral. Like you've got to think a little bit more long term. Um, and also just like all those other things that you want, that you think that you are, like having a great relationship with your engineering team or having a great relationship with your designer, like all that stuff comes so much better when you treat somebody like a person. Um, and so you're much closer to getting the things that you want anyway by just doing it the right way, by not taking shortcuts with your relationships. You know, that's that's a million decisions boiled down into one thing that you'll deal with throughout your career. Like, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to the really hard stuff. Like, hey, I've got to let somebody go right now. And it's either
Yeah.
because there's not enough money to pay them, or it's because like they're not performing at their job and you've done your best to try and help them perform and it just is not working out. Like you're going to be tempted to do some things that you wouldn't normally do in a regular relationship, just because it's uncomfortable or whatever. Like wisdom is really going to be like asking yourself like, how do I love this person? Really,
Mm.
when it comes down to that. Um, so
Yeah.
this is all the softer side of like working in the industry. Um,
Hmm.
but I think this stuff matters. All the technical stuff, like you can learn from O'Reilly or whatever the hell, like,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, it's almost like the technical skills are like par for the course. I mean, to be able to get started and then you pick it up as you go as well. But like Yeah, I mean, this stuff is kind of the stuff that I mean, I know I personally, but a lot of people don't, think of when they first think, like if they want to, like, improve or whatever, they don't think about the softer side of things. But I mean, soft skills are probably, I mean, it's like soft skills is it's like more important than the technical stuff most of the time, right? I mean, in everything, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and it's the stuff that you take with you after your career's over. And I know
Mm-hmm.
for your audience, like their career's just starting, but careers are long, jobs are short.
Mm-hmm.
Like someday you're gonna, I don't know. It's easy to put this into terms that it seems self-serving. And
Mm-hmm.
let me tell you, like I've invested in plenty of relationships that when I needed somebody's help in return, like I didn't get it. And you kind of need to
Mm-hmm.
be okay with that. Like you kind of need to be okay with I'm just gonna love this person because it's the right thing to do. And
Mm-hmm.
like if it ends up being beneficial later on, like that should kind of be beside the point. But often it is
Yeah.
beneficial in the end, you know. But like
Right.
I don't know, like even because people can see through your bullshit too. People can tell.
Yeah. Like if you're profiteering and you're always looking for like tit for tat, like everything's a transaction. People know that.
Oh yeah, yeah, like 100%. I don't know, like people are better at seeing through your bullshit than you think they are. And
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know, if you really want to build trust with somebody, do something for the right reason. Like at its core. And yeah, sometimes people are going to disappoint you, and that's okay. Like it's okay to be
Mm-hmm.
disappointed. And other times people are going to surprise you, and that's great too. But I don't know. Love is a gift in and of itself. Like you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm getting like really far down the rabbit trails here, but
No, I mean, I appreciated that. Like that was yeah, that was really actually very insightful. I actually I really enjoyed that. Yeah, I thank you. I guess thanks for sharing. And thanks for sitting down with me. I know this is you're quite busy with everything that you're doing. Um, I guess did you want to like shout out anything in particular? I guess Castro and maybe um, I guess people can follow you on social media and whatnot if they want to. Um,
yeah, sure. I'm Jesse Herlitz, Herlitz or Zed if you're Canadian, on Twitter, and I'm an asshole and doing my best that I can. So take anything that I have to say with a grain of salt. Um, and yeah, I mean, if you want to check out our app, like it's on the App Store if you have an iPhone. You can check us
yeah.
out on our website, castro.fm. And but other than that, just go and enjoy a good podcast like this one. This is a great podcast. I'm excited about this.
Thanks.
Yeah,
I guess I'll end it there.
cool.